or go to Clean with a K, KLEANradio.com. Now your hosts for Clean Radio, Andrew and Judah.
All right, welcome to Clean Radio. It's Andrew with my co-host Judah.
Hey now.
How you doing, Judah?
I am great. I'm alive.
You're alive.
I wasn't affected by the rapture, and
That's right.
we're sitting here. I mean,
It's a good reason to stay sober.
We have another rapture coming up next year, supposedly.
Oh yeah, that's right, 2012.
The Mayans were in competition, and the Mayans win.
Yeah, sort of like death, you know. Nobody knows our expiration date. So.
But even, you know, here's the thing. I never understand people about rapture type stuff or any of that stuff. You don't know.
Yeah.
Like, that's the great part about death, is that you don't know when it's coming.
Okay.
So
if there can be a great thing about death.
Well, it is. I mean, that's the light in the end of the light at the. I guess the light at the end.
Or the beginning of the tunnel. Maybe.
And thank you for wearing an amazing shirt tonight. Thank you for not wearing a Joy Division shirt.
Yeah, I'm a little upset about that. Actually, they were all dirty, so I couldn't wear a Joy Division.
I stole all your Joy Division shirts. I'm actually gonna burn all of them.
It's been a very interesting week this week. Unlike last week, where there was very little news about addiction.
Yes.
We had the whole Sanjay Gupta expose with Patrick Kennedy, which I found fascinating. Did you get a chance to catch that?
No, but I know who Patrick Kennedy is.
It was on CNN, and they had a really, really interesting show. And Patrick Kennedy announced this Moon for the Mind thing that he's doing. So, like,
what exactly is that?
Well, how JFK basically inspired the country to go to the moon. He's inspiring scientists and mental health professionals to really, you know, achieve full understanding of a whole range of mental health issues.
Leave it to a Kennedy to strive for
something big.
Something big. And I mean, on the other hand, you have Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know, who married a Kennedy.
And has a serious problem.
Might have a serious addiction problem.
Right. But anyway, it was really interesting. He talked a lot about what we talk about. He talked a lot about you know, the differences between mental health and the lack of parity between regular health coverage and mental health coverage, and how he's working hard to change that, or has worked hard now that he's out of office, and will continue to now that he's out of office. But he also talked a lot about how the stigma of addiction in mental health, and how often, I think it was a couple shows ago, someone asked me why I had sort of gotten into mental health as a career, and I said that it was, I looked around and I looked at what I saw was the most stigmatized population that was around, and it wasn't really a racial minority anymore or some other minority group. It was really the mentally ill.
Right.
And he acknowledged that on CNN, that he thought that he had a similar idea that, you know, mental illness and including addiction, you know, you wouldn't pass a diabetic in the street and, you know, sort of sneer at them or whatever, but somebody with mental illness or, you know, chronic long-term alcoholism, you know, just pass them. And
well, something we spoke about a few weeks ago too is with the Virginia Tech shooter.
Right. And he mentioned that as well.
And you know, and it's true. I mean, you know, bullets, you know, guns don't kill people.
Right. The big issue was gun control, not mental health.
Not mental health.
Right.
And it's always the case.
How can you not look at the picture of the guy from Virginia Tech and not notice that the guy clearly has a mental health issue?
Right.
Right.
I mean, but there's so many examples. Obviously, you know, we were talking about in the car too about the IMF guy, you know, the leader of the Monetary Fund, and you know, you were explaining to me. A lot of people don't understand about, you know, you were saying about, you know, just describing what most rapists and all that stuff about. What were you saying? I mean, it was actually very interesting. The whole violence of it, as opposed to
the rape is as much an issue of a violent criminal act than it is a sexual act. In fact, it's more about violence and control than it is about sex. So, and it deals generally with people that, and I'm not saying, I have no idea what this guy did from the International Monetary Fund. In reality, I have no idea what he did. I know what he's accused of, but you know, people that do things like what he's accused of, it's a built-up process where they have a fantasy that they explore for a long period of time, and then all of a sudden it's released.
So do you think this has something to do with us living longer, that we have so many of these mental issues?
Well, there's certainly a whole bunch of new mental issues that have occurred because people live longer, and there's greater frequency of these types of illnesses, like vascular dementia, where we get the deterioration of the brain because the like your arteries in your heart get clogged as you get older. And that makes sense. And we have a lot of medications that deal with that. And we can go in and we can put in stents and we can, put in new heart valves. But we can't do anything for the vascularity and the veins and arteries in your brain. They just clog up. And when they clog up, the brain cells around them die. And that causes dementia.
Or if you drink too much, you get wet brain.
Which is kind of a similar thing where
Right.
you're basically killing off brain cells due to lack of proper nutrition through, blood and oxygen.
So, I mean, do you think the reason...
Nutrients.
Here's a question. The reason about mental illness and addiction, I think a lot of times the biggest problem people have with addiction is because in the end of the day, people still feel like it's a choice.
Yeah, the morality issue,
Yeah, it's because...
as I like to call it.
Well, I mean, I think that's a hard word, though, to use for it because morality people then associate with religion.
I think even though with addiction professionals, you see an unwillingness to say it's clear that addiction is a disease because you still have to deal with the choice element.
Right. It's a very...
Right. And then, as I've always said, there's this continuum from drug abuse into drug addiction. And so people that abuse drugs, some of them will fall into addiction, many won't.
So then you're saying many of them will fall into a disease. You see, these are all the
exactly.
problems.
So once it becomes addiction, to me it's definite. There's no doubt. Anybody that says that alcoholism or drug addiction isn't a disease are missing the point. They're missing the point that once you get into that level of usage of abuse or exposure to that toxin at that point or chemical, it's definitely a disease. There is a disease process of addiction that's proven.
Here's a great, so you know what, and I just made sense of myself because you have a lot of people that say, well, you can't, can you give yourself a disease?
Sure, diabetes is a perfect example.
Or AIDS, you can.
Well, you can acquire
or you
AIDS,
can acquire it, right. But you could give yourself diabetes too. I've never.
So, and I think that, I was for a long time, I struggled with the issue of whether or not alcoholism was a disease. I actually, believe it or not, was writing about it back in college. And statistically, it's hard to prove that there's like a disease of addiction. My goodness. I think we have a diabetic shooting up in the lobby. It's fantastic.
And the number here is 877-830-830, 877-830-830. We know our guests are actually listening to the show, though.
Right.
And they might come in here and...
fantastic.
We actually have great guests tonight. I'm actually really excited.
We do. We have...
And let's thank a few people because, it does take a bunch of people to put on this show, and I think it would be very nice to thank your wife, Amy Dressner.
Yeah, she's been doing a really good job.
Been doing an amazing job booking guests, and Jamie Broyles, who does an amazing job on our website, writing up about the guests.
And Christian Overgaard, who actually is our web designer.
And then we have Patrick Sean Kennedy.
Yes.
Of no relation to the real Kennedys. And
unfortunately, after talking about the Kennedys, it would have been great
if we could have just had him sit down and go. It's because he's actually working, so he can't be a Kennedy. And our newest addition to the studio, somebody's name I can never remember, other than he's a really nice guy. Don't give me anything about names. You can't remember anybody's name. Okay, you can't remember anybody's name when they're in the studio, when they left. You call me up in the middle of the week.
Okay, fair enough.
Yes. So what's your name again? Steven.
Yeah.
The lovely Steven. Knows how to hold the camera. So it does take a lot of people to put on this show, and we just want to thank them all. And Patrick is just an amazing...
It sounds like we're ending the show. Yeah. It's like you'd be good at eulogies. I think you should go into eulogies.
I had a rabbi that one time told me that.
Really?
Because I was giving my grandfather's eulogy.
Because everybody's falling asleep.
I just want to tell you I want to tell you a crazy story. I actually dropped my grandfather's coffin.
Why is that a great story? First of all, and second of all, why would you want to tell anyone that?
It was because so I dropped. Because in Jewish we lowered ourselves, and my side of the pulley falls,
right,
and all of a sudden you hear just a thud.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden you hear a woman start crying.
It all makes sense.
Literally, you hear all the women just start crying. The kicker is. So at my cousin's funeral, his wife dies, and he walks up to me. He's like this 86-year-old guy. He walks up to me, and he goes, listen, can you do me one favor? I think he's going to ask me some great thing. He goes, don't bury my wife. And that was my cousin Howard Hall. But I gave my grandfather's eulogy, and I have really bad handwriting, so I had a hard time reading it. And
okay, before we lose our whole audience, why don't we introduce our guests?
Yeah, just give me 1 second.
All right, okay. I'll let
So
you
I realized
everybody in there, by the way, we have some great guests coming up.
And I already mentioned
but I'm
that.
going to give Judah his moment in the sun.
And I just wanted to say, so I realized that when you can't, when you read and you can't read your own handwriting, it sounds like you're mumbling, but mumbling can come across as crying. So it sounded like when I was giving the eulogy, like I was tearing up. It was just I couldn't read my own. I just couldn't read my own handwriting. And to anybody that has to give a eulogy out there, that is just write in.
You're like a nightmare.
Don't write very neatly.
I think I understand why you drank.
Yes. You think the neuroses that lie
we
in
only
me?
destroyed generations of like peace through death.
Yes.
And,
Yeah, that's just me.
Mumbling.
So the number here is 877-8830-830. It's 877-8830-830. What you want to
Let's
introduce
talk
our
about
guests?
our guests.
Yes.
Yeah, we got Doug Caine.
Doug Caine.
He's on A&E's Relapse.
An amazing show.
He's actually, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but he's my favorite guy on the show.
You're allowed to say till the next guy from Relapse comes
on. No, I really do. I like the few episodes I've seen with him. I'm very, very impressed. His background's more NA, sort of, narcotics than alcohol, I believe. But we'll let him describe that.
Yes.
Right? And then we have Matt.
Mm-hmm.
Knost. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right.
He's not
told
related.
Me 8 times
he's not related
to say
to.
I probably screwed it up.
He's not related to the rapper Nas.
No, right? Not Knost. Anyway,
You snorted.
I did. Yeah, it occasionally happens. So he's a comedian.
Okay.
And he will tell us his credits, but he's at the Comedy Store, and he's got a big show coming up in San Diego, I think.
Perfect.
So it's going to be exciting. Talk about him. He's sober and but comes from a different perspective. So I think we're going to have like a lot of cool interplay. So let's take a break. We'll go out and we'll come back in. We'll have Doug in the studio. So here we are at Clean Radio. You can reach us at
877-830-830. That's 877-830-830.
Come back. Listen to Clean. We'll be back a couple minutes after a couple of breaks.
Now back to Clean Radio
The Sober Lifestyle Show, presented by Clean Residential Treatment Center.
on Angels Radio AM 830.
Welcome back to Clean Radio.
It's back.
It's Andrew and Judah.
You said welcome back.
What do I have to pay you to stop doing that dance? I mean, really, seriously.
I thought you were putting it up on YouTube, actually.
We're gonna do a clip. Patrick, are we gonna do a clip of Judah's dance?
It'll be up next week.
Next week.
Yeah.
Next week we're gonna have a montage of Judah's crazy intro dance.
And then we're going to change all the music up.
Right.
'Cause I love how we're making fun of My Chemical Romance.
And then I'm going
and-
to take that montage and I'm going to send it out to a couple psychiatrist friends of mine.
Yes.
I'm going to get a diagnosis.
We've had how many psychiatrists in here trying to diagnose me?
We've had like 4, and none
Yeah.
of them have been able to do
Yeah.
it so far. Or they're just unwilling to embarrass you on the air. I
Thank
don't know.
God, because my mother listens.
Right.
If I put the headphones on, can I see the dance?
You'll see it on the other side of the break. The engineer will put on something like Dance-erific, and I'll just...
So to everybody on the air, welcome to the studio, Doug Caine. How are you doing, Doug?
Hi, I'm great. How are you doing, Andrew?
I'm doing pretty good.
Glad to hear it.
So Doug, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
You own a company called Sober Champion.
I do. Sober
and
champion.
Is that actually like sober companion company, or is it more interventionist, or?
It is all sober coaching, all sober companions.
Oh, great.
all the time.
All the time.
That's right. All the time, 24/7. That's right.
Right.
That's all we do.
Do you have clients nationwide or
International, yes.
internationally? Oh,
Mhm.
that's great.
Yeah,
That's
it
good.
is great.
Good.
It's great for the clients because they don't have to get loaded anymore.
Well, that's sort of the key, right?
Pretty much.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then you're on the show A&E Relapse.
Yes.
Yeah. How did you get involved in that? Was it just sort of?
How did I get involved? They called up and said, "Listen, you seem like an interesting guy.
Right.
Would you like to be on a TV show?" And I said, "No." And they
Mhm.
said, "Will you please?" And I said, "Will you pay me?" And they said, "Yes." And I
Right.
said, "Okay."
Actually, I've seen the show several times, and I actually think you're one of the more dynamic people on there.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I like to think the same thing about myself, but I can't tell.
Well, I found your approach different than the rest. You know.
You know what? It's the cool thing about that show is that every coach on that show has a really different approach, really unique, and really, if you can get the right coach for the right client,
Right.
perfection.
Right.
There's a guy, Seth, real tough guy in New York, talks
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that, right?
The bald guy, right?
Right,
Yeah,
bald,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
The little goatee,
Right.
perfect for a tough drunk fireman in Detroit. You
Right.
put me with a fireman in Detroit,
Yeah.
I'm gonna Nancy in there in my little Steve Madden shoes, and he's gonna look at me like, "What are you doing here? Get out!"
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a tough thing. I find that is true just with the treatment centers that I run and the work that we do. It's matching clinicians with clients is very key.
Absolutely. Look, in your business, in residential treatment, you can't imagine 100% of your potential clients are right for your facility. You got to screen your clients the same way you got to screen your providers.
Absolutely.
So
Hopefully.
we do the same thing. Hopefully, yeah. Absolutely.
And having good mix of clinicians. Yeah. And
That's the-
we're in West Hollywood, so there's a lot of diversity.
Oh, yeah.
So
I've actually seen your facility.
yes.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with it. I think it's gorgeous.
Oh, thank you.
It's like the secret garden, I always say, when you walk in, because you're like on the street, you really don't expect it when you walk in, and it's like you're in Mr. Miyagi's house.
More secret or more garden?
A little bit of both.
Oh my goodness.
It's a lot of plants there. It's beautiful. It is. You don't expect walking in. You're in Hollywood, and
True.
the place is great.
True.
Yeah.
I do the same thing you do, though. I mean, I've met a lot of your staff.
Right.
And you have old and young and this type and that type.
Yep.
So I have the same thing.
Yeah.
You have to.
Yeah, you got to.
Yeah, in this part of that, in that part of the business. And really, for effective treatment, regardless of the business.
It's impossible to join with clients unless you have that initial sort of good transference with a client.
Yeah.
Not to sound too clinical, but
true.
that's what it's about.
Do you
So-
find that most people that get sober companions hire them for themselves, or people hire them for them?
I'd say about 60% of my clients, we get brought in by a family member, a business associate, a manager, a talent manager, something like that. And about 40% of the people call me up and say, "Look, I've been to 15 rehabs. I just spent $1.5 million, and I'm shooting dope again."
Right.
So
Yeah. So you deal with a lot of very, very difficult long-term clients.
only clients I get are the difficult clients.
Right.
There's a lot of difficult clients. But
Yeah, when the clients have made every countless vain attempts, right?
Right.
Maybe not so vain, but
Right.
countless attempts,
Right.
and they haven't found what worked for them.
How did you get into this yourself? You're sober yourself?
I don't shoot heroin and cocaine anymore.
So you've always been into narcotics.
I love narcotics.
Right. Do you see a difference between alcoholism, narcotic
it's the
abuse?
same
You
thing.
think it's all the same thing?
It's all the same thing. Alcohol is a drug, and drug addicts take drugs, so apparently all alcoholics are addicts, yeah.
Right.
Which is we were actually discussing that before in the green room about I was talking about I'm one of the rare few alcoholics, but any story, most of the stories you read in the
You mean
big book,
exclusive alcohol.
exclusive alcoholic,
You're not
but
poly substance abuse.
right? I had no poly substance abuse, but most of the stories you read about from the old timers in the big book, so much drugs are mentioned in these stories that it's so odd that anybody in AA would ever have had a problem with drug talk.
It makes sense to me. I mean, I'm not a member of AA, so it's no biggie for me to talk about the book. Look, it says this is about freedom from alcohol.
Right.
So
And singleness of purpose.
It makes sense to me.
Right.
Look, if I drank the way I shot dope, I would be in AA right now. I
Right.
wouldn't be sitting here with you guys.
Right.
Because alcohol will kill you faster than any other drug, man.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it for me is self-medicating, like the drugs that people choose. I mean, that's generally where people get on a tract, and the people that are attracted to amphetamines generally have a different chemical composition and personality than the people that are attracted to alcohol. And then you can go from use to abuse to addiction.
True.
Is the way I sort of see it. So, and I always had this little challenge, or I was speaking with someone and they were like, well, I said, name a substance and I'll tell you what most likely their psychiatric underlying disorder is, right? And I would do this and they were like kind of amazed because they would actually look at their friends and they'd be like, oh my God, you're describing the personality and the personality traits of my friends that have that type of substance abuse disorder.
It's like psychiatric squares.
Well, it's pretty simple if you think about it. Psychiatric squares. Right?
Let's play.
That's better than Square Psychiatrics.
Yeah.
Wow. Is it?
I don't know. Maybe it's the same thing.
Andrew actually used to give a break to some of his psychiatric patients if they'd play. And they'd be a contestant on his show that never aired.
It's a private show.
Okay, so a guy that likes to shoot, because I've been wondering what my underlying causes and conditions were since the mid-'90s.
Right.
A guy that likes to shoot heroin,
Right.
I think gets kind of bored and starts shooting cocaine too.
Right.
What's wrong with me?
Generally, and it's generalization, so it doesn't always apply. So
Sure.
this doesn't necessarily apply to you.
Sure.
Qualification.
Have
But
some,
generally,
come on, have some faith
no,
in your
because
belief.
nothing's
It's-
100%. Nothing
Okay, so
is
it's
like you like to say
92%.
100%.
92%.
Generally, you see strong anti-personality traits and people who are very sensitive that like to avoid pain.
Anti what?
Social personality traits.
Antisocial personality.
Yeah, so, and that generally stems from family trauma.
There you go.
So close?
Yeah, I was wondering if you have some Kleenex.
Oh, Barbara Walters moment. And the number here
We're
is
still shooting for that, by the way. We sort of had one, but it was Judah crying over something that was completely irrelevant.
Field of Dreams, okay?
Field of Dreams. He started crying over Field of Dreams. That's
It touches
that's the
me.
biggest
It's one of my. It's the movie.
Really?
Yeah, even when I think about it, I get teary-eyed.
Oh, it's just
that's so
pathetic.
cute.
Yeah, I don't cry. I don't really get emotional, but something about Field of Dreams.
Yeah.
I never saw that movie.
You should see it.
Okay.
No, don't. Trust me.
It's anybody that has issues with their fathers. Love Field of Dreams.
Or just watch the TV show Relapse.
Relapse, yes.
Yeah, right? Much quicker.
Serious.
Right?
You're in and out in 22 minutes.
Right? Instead of an hour and a half.
And it's free.
And it's so is yeah.
I'm sure Field of Dreams is free.
Field of Dreams is free at this point too on Netflix. And the number here is 877-830-830. It's 877-830-830. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Doug, what do you think's like the most difficult types of clients you deal with?
Late adolescent females, whether or not there's major league co-occurring mental disorder,
Right?
and anyone else who's got a heavy-duty, big-time co-occurring mental disorder.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you want to call it bipolar or schizoaffective, or if you want to call it borderline with X
Right.
features or Y
Or all the
features.
above. Right. They're all different disorders, so.
Those who are good old-fashioned stone-cold drunks and dope fiends
Right.
respond really well to a wide variety of treatments.
Yeah.
They really do. I did. I was coming out of jail, and they said, well, you can have 8 years in penitentiary. You can go to this halfway house for a year.
Right.
So I went to the Yeshiva of the Damned, and Baruch Hashem, here I am.
I get what that means. It means thank God.
Yeah, I got it too.
Okay.
You get it, but he doesn't?
Well, Andrew's married in. He's not one of us.
Oh, he's not.
No,
I'm
everybody
getting to
thinks it.
assumes I'm
Everybody
Jewish.
assumes he's
I didn't
Jewish.
believe- I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
didn't
It's
realize.
Okay, no, it's fine.
This is not a bad assumption for one, unless you're in the Middle
actually,
East.
I have about as good a Jew pass as you can get.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
but it's like
my business partners are Jewish.
But it's
my wife's
this is the
Jewish.
place you want everybody to assume you are. Like if you're in West Virginia, you're like your Andrew's walking around. It's Spanswick. It's Polish Irish. No Jew. Yeah.
It's kind of closer. Is British, so Scottish actually.
Yes, Scottish. So he's not, but everybody assumes it.
Okay. Yeah.
But
I
it's
figured.
one man separates the Jews from the non-Jews.
One what separates?
One man, Jesus, who
One
was
man
Jewish.
separates the
Andrew's really smart.
Wow.
He's just.
Is it smart? Or
Yeah,
is it...
he says stuff sometimes that I can't question because it's just I'm not sure if it's
doesn't wanna
smart
get into
or
it.
it's.
Let's take a call. We got a call.
Yes.
We got a call from Frank in Newport Beach. Frank, you're on KLEAN Radio.
Yeah, hi. This is Frank.
Hey, Frank.
Hi. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I recovered, and I'm recovering both. And I do go to AA meetings,
Uh-huh.
and I have a unique experience of having 28 years of drunkenness and 28 years of sobriety. I'm 73 years old.
Oh wow.
Wow, you're right on your perfect seesaw.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right, right.
I finally
For
broke
every day
even.
drinking, you've had a day sober.
Congratulations.
That's congratulations. Yes,
Well,
absolutely.
thank you very much. Yes.
So you got a question, or you got to
Well, I
share?
love your show. I was listening to, obviously, before I got on, I was listening, and the gentleman that's been sharing is right on. I mean, nobody knows that unless they've gone through the same moccasins and walking the same moccasins, and I agree with everything he said.
That's great.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I don't have any specific questions at all, but I thought if there's anything that you might want to ask somebody who has the...
Yeah, do you have any wisdom of how you got 28 years and what changed your life?
Well, the reason why I got 28 years is because I was homicidal and suicidal when I reached my bottom. And I actually was in the kitchen of my house, and my daughter, who's only 5 years old, came into the kitchen, and I had an uncontrollable urge to stab her to death.
Well,
see, but you know it's great. Only in Alcoholics Anonymous or only in 12-step groups do people laugh at that.
Yeah,
well,
Judas actually giggling.
Right?
Well, he didn't kill her.
No, I understand.
Yeah. But also Judah relates. That's
Yes, I do.
Yeah, Judah relates on both sides of that coin. I think.
Yes.
That was the last time I took a drink, and
Wow.
I knew I was out of my mind, and I begged God to help me, and I didn't even know who God was.
Right.
But he did help me.
Well, that's great. And so how was your life once you got sober? Was it a big difference?
Well, my life was really not that hot when I was sober until I did all 12 steps.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know. 12 steps taught me how to live life properly, and I just didn't know how to live life properly until I got into the steps themselves. So I completed my 12 steps the first year, and I personally have sponsored 500 men over the last 28 years.
Wow.
Only 500? Come on.
Wow.
What kind of 12 step is that?
Right?
That's a lot of guys to
That is a
sponsor. My
lot of
God,
guys.
good for
Right?
you.
Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah, Newport has quite a lot of drinking down there. I went down there. I had a friend that lived in there, and I couldn't believe how many bars are along there.
Oh, you lived in Newport too.
So,
Oh, yeah. Well, really, every place has a lot of drinking. I've gone to AA meetings all over the world, and no matter where I go, I find a bunch of drunks.
yeah. You always find them.
Well, it's amazing. What was I watching? What show was I watching the other day? Pawn Stars, and they had this Pawn Stars.
Porn.
Somebody brought in
Porn. Judah from New York.
Somebody brought in what do you call it?
Porn.
One of those
Porn.
mixing machines. It was like from the 20s. A fruit. So they would mix it with the drinks because
A
of
muddler?
all the bathtub gin that people were making in those days during Prohibition.
You mean shaker?
A blender?
Cocktail?
It was
shaker?
it was a cocktail mixer, but it was some
Cocktail
really,
shaker.
it was a really cool form of it, and.
No, I don't, because you're not explaining.
I'm having a hard time
Is this
because
a James Bond movie?
Yes,
Right?
it was
James Bond or
No,
James
shaker,
Bond?
not
James
sure.
Bond, and
Almond
just
or
what
almond?
people would do to drink. They would, make gin in their bathtub. The
Right.
people were doing anything they could to find.
Well, they were
alcohol.
also blending poor quality alcohol with other substances to sell it cheaper.
Right, and they had
A lot
to,
like we see with illegal drugs right now, where they're cut with all sorts of this. I mean, like pure heroin. If you were to shoot pure heroin, the health effects of that, if you did it at a good dose, are very minimal. Actually, it's what it's cut with, and the fact that people have unregulated doses that causes problems. And that's why, for example, in Britain, they have drug maintenance programs where if you say you're an addict and you are approved by a nurse, a psychologist, and a psychiatrist, they'll actually give you a maintenance dose of pure heroin.
Are they maintaining that for new addicts still coming in? Or did
Yeah,
they stop?
no, they're still doing it. Yeah, and they just approved ibogaine as a detox drug in London, which we can talk about as well.
Yeah, Frank, we
Virgin
actually.
Atlantic leaves from LAX.
Yeah, right.
Frank, I want to ask you a
Big time
question,
today.
but we have to put you on hold for a second because we got to go to a break. So we're going to get right back to you. And you're listening to KLEAN Radio. The number here is 877-8830-830, 877-8830 and 830. We're in the studio.
You're good.
Oh, I'm good. It just went dead for a second. Yeah, you could keep going.
Yeah, you were going.
I was, we're in the studio.
I'm just reveling in your unprofessionalism of this second.
of
Can
this.
you understand anything he's saying right now?
We actually have on the website, we have English subtitles for the show for people that watch it later.
Don't speak Brooklynese.
That don't speak Brooklynese. I have it a lot out here, just so you know, when I'm talking to especially English people, the conversations we have are very disturbing because I think 10% is being understood.
All right, well, we'll be right back on Clean Radio, and enjoy the Smiths on the way out.
Log on to Clean with a K, KLEANradio.com.
Clean Radio on Angels Radio AM 830 is presented by Clean Residential Treatment Center, a dynamic and professional addiction treatment facility.
Now it's back to Andrew and Judah.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
For the block boy.
The Judah dance.
Scarface, man.
For those that really want to see the Judah dance, you have to go to KLEANradio.com.
Or just see me.
Clean with a K, KLEAN radio.com. You can watch all our past episodes, which include some exciting guests from the past.
Some exciting dances.
And Judah's crazy dances. And more importantly, some great conversations with great clinicians and also some very entertaining, sober entertainers.
And good callers like Frank, who we put on hold.
Yeah, Frank, you still with us?
Yes, I certainly am, and thank you.
Yeah, so over the break, Judah came up with what I think is a fascinating question. I hope you're able to answer it. So, Judah?
Frank, how has the program, this 12-step program, changed in the last 28 years? Has it? No,
it hasn't. No, the steps don't change. They were actually fashioned after the Bible. You know, very few people know that both members of the original members of Alcoholics Anonymous were Christian men, and they used the Bible to start out. It hasn't changed.
But I don't just mean the book. I mean as far as like meetings. Have meetings just always stayed?
Oh yeah, there's a big difference in meetings now. When I was sober initially back in 1982, there was still a shame and guilt factor, you know, and people would look down on us. Oh, you're an alcoholic. Today, you know, people can be at a cocktail party and say, I'm a member of a 12-step program, and it's like you're almost a celebrity. It's changed completely.
Many of them are.
Most of them are. Yeah.
You know, it's funny, Frank, because one of the things that we've been discussing over the last few weeks is this issue of, isn't it maybe time that, and there was this article in the New York Times, maybe the second A in Alcoholics Anonymous is sort of past its due date, and that the stigma of mental health and addiction needs to sort of be lifted, and one of the ways to do that is for important people that have had a history of abuse of drugs and alcohol to come out of the closet, so to speak, and be more open about the problems they have.
Well, now are you saying that people who are a member of Alcoholics Anonymous should disclose their membership? Is that what you mean?
No, what I'm saying is that anybody who's had an issue with drugs or alcohol abuse should maybe start, especially celebrities, might want to be more open about the fact that they've had an issue and that they've recovered. I'm not saying necessarily that they should disclose their anonymity in Alcoholics Anonymous per se, but that if they choose to, I think they should have a right to do that. But I think that it's important that people that have had a history of substance abuse problems and alcohol abuse problems should start being more vocal about the fact that there's treatment available, and that you know, it's not the stigma that it used to be, like you said.
Well, yeah. What happens is that any day I'm likely to drink. I just fortify my sobriety by working with men, going to meetings, connecting with God, and working the steps. But you know, it still doesn't give me a clean bill of health, and because in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it says alcohol is a symptom of other underlying emotional disorders. Mm-hmm. I had underlying emotional disorders when I was 8 years old.
Sure.
So, you know, we don't ever get well.
Right, but neither do diabetics, and people that have diabetes openly talk about their diabetes, and
You're
yet,
absolutely right.
You know,
Marlo Thomas, big advocate.
Right, yeah, and yet, you know, they still get caught eating cake. Right.
Yeah, there's two examples I'd like to point out. Don Drysdale, he was quite a celebrity, announcer for the Dodgers.
Right.
He used to say on the radio station that he was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the only problem is he went out and got drunk, and he died of drunk, you know?
Yeah.
I guess that's why I didn't know he was sober.
But I think that's part of the thing. Like, even if people do end up relapsing,
that it's okay.
Right.
There shouldn't be such a right.
Well, I don't think it's okay to relapse.
No,
I mean, it's unfortunate that
right,
people
but it shouldn't be. You shouldn't be beaten down because of it.
Right, it's part of the illness. We know that relapse is part of the condition of addiction, Probably, Doug, you could probably speak more to that than being that you're on the show. Relapse, I hope you can.
Well, relapse is to be expected.
Right.
The people who are atypical are people who don't relapse. You know, as an alcoholic, my natural condition is to be a drunk. You know, so you know, I'm expected to be a drunk, and I'm not. You know,
I'm going to take issue with that, Frank. I'm a stone cold dope fiend. I don't maybe qualify to go to Alcoholics Anonymous, but certainly another 12-step fellowship. I believe my natural condition, I really do believe my natural condition is to be a healthy, loving, service-oriented man. I think my natural condition is to show up at my kid's 9th birthday party today and play with him in the park. I think that my sickness, one of my sicknesses, in addition to having diabetes, is addiction. And that when I don't treat my diabetes too well, I end up going to hospital and I can't be there for my kid. When I don't treat my addiction too well, I end up going to the hospital or the jailhouse or the morgue and I can't be there for my kid. But I don't believe my natural state as an addict is to be shooting dope. I think my natural state as a human being, man, is to be here now and do what I can do. I have an illness and it's my choice today, since I'm recovered, whether I want to suffer or not.
Well, I agree with you. I don't. I'm not against your opinion by any stretch of imagination. I think a better word would be my typical condition would be alcoholism, and I'm atypical now. You know, I
agree with you 100%, Frank.
I think you actually kind of both agree. Just,
I think he and
saying it different ways.
It's funny they both use the word that's it's a very taboo word to use sometimes. They both said recovered.
Right.
And
I'm recovered.
Which is a word I agree with, and it says it in one of the, it says it in the textbook in, Alcoholics Anonymous. It says we have recovered.
Right.
And a lot of people don't say that. They use the word recovering.
There's a lot of misinformation that has nothing to do with the program per se, whether you're talking about AA or NA or any other A. There's the program, and then there's the fellowship.
Right.
There's what's in the book,
which is what Frank said. The program has stayed the same.
Hasn't changed, right.
The program hasn't changed. The big book, the first the first 164 pages have stayed the same, but the fellowship has, and it will.
In the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, within those 164 pages, it says we have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body.
Right.
So it's not like, I won't drink again. It's just I don't have that hopeless case of mind and body anymore.
And I love that you use that word. Andrew was on the phone with somebody last week, a treatment facility owner in another state in San Francisco, and he used the word recovered too. And it is. If you are not drinking or using drugs, you're recovered.
Right. Listen, you guys, if addiction is a disease, and I don't know, sometimes I think it's a condition. I'm not always sure. If it is a disease, and I have another disease, diabetes in my case, and I've recovered from the suffering that I get from diabetes. I take my insulin, I check my blood sugar, I don't have chocolate cake for breakfast. And I'm free of suffering from diabetes.
Right. Well, actually, you actually have diabetes. You're treating the diabetes.
But I'm
so
cancer
is about.
But you're free of the symptoms of diabetes. Right. You still actually have diabetes, and that's the same thing with addiction.
Is that the same thing with cancer?
Yeah. Once you become you're going to get me into all sorts of technical things.
So
I don't want that. For example, with cancer, people say you're in remission. That doesn't mean that the cancer went away. It just means it stopped progressing.
Right.
So there's all sorts of levels of different definitions, and we could get into medical things all day long. But I think the key thing here is that once a person has gone from drug abuse into drug addiction, there's no going back.
It's the pickle.
It's the pickle.
Once you become a pickle, you can't become a cucumber again.
And there's a lot of people. In fact, the vast majority of people that abuse alcohol don't actually become full-blown alcoholics. And that's evident by alcohol use in college. You look at, if you do a survey of people in college, the amount of binge drinking is about 70 to 80% of college students, and yet only still about 12% of them will become full-blown alcoholics.
Right.
So most people can actually remoderate their drinking and not be a full-blown alcoholic. But then there's still the 12% that they can't moderate their drinking easily and progress into the disease of addiction. And once you're in that disease of addiction, there are actual physical changes in the brain. And there's some people that are predisposed to it at a lower level, much like other illnesses. For example, schizophrenia. A lot of people are genetically predisposed to schizophrenia, but it takes a traumatic event to actually have them have a first psychotic break into schizophrenia. So, and for the symptoms of the disease to show.
There's a lot of comparison between diabetes and alcoholism, and there's a significant difference. Diabetes is a physical disease, and alcoholism or drug addiction, either one, like the man said, doesn't matter. It's a drug. Is a mental, emotional, and spiritual disease. That's the problem.
Well, I think that's the interesting discussion. I mean, Doug's saying, you know, that there is a spiritual and a mental component to diabetes.
There is completely.
Right.
There are, Frank, and I think, again, this is one of those times where Frank and I are in agreement with one another, but we're just using different words to get there, a different path. With diabetes, if you have a defiance, if you're angry at your body or at your mom and dad for making you die, or whatever,
or God,
if you're angry at the food industry, if you're
right.
angry at high fructose corn syrup, whatever it is you're angry at, and you're not capable of really treating the physical part of that disease, you've got a mental and ultimately a spiritual issue to deal with. And when you want to treat your diabetes,
potentially fatal.
Can I be honest with you? I've never thought about it like that.
With any
I've never thought about it like that.
Seriously.
You know, I've never.
A lot of people die from diabetes. They die from, you know, not eating right, not using
right. If you're not spiritually fit, if you're not mentally, when I say spiritually fit, I'm not talking about biblical spiritual. Sure. I'm talking about healthy, of health of mind and body.
Yeah. I think one of the things that is different, though, and this is just, and maybe this might speak to what Frank's talking about a little bit, is that there's elements of addiction that have to do with your development, that have to do with your, you know, your sense of identity, your emotional development, and that's that moral sort of spiritual sort of element. Diabetes, you get, you don't have a choice, you get it.
Right. True.
So there's a lot of there's a lot of drug abuse that's self-medicating.
Agreed.
Right? And then people don't make decisions to treat the underlying symptoms of their emotional state or their psychiatric state. Right. And then they get into an addictive state. You know what, Frank, we're going to have to cut you off because we have some other callers coming in. And but thank you so much for your call.
And
thank you for listening, and call us again.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. Anyway, very interesting call.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. There's a last little piece. There's a hidden little piece that we don't typically talk about too much. Whether it's addiction, alcoholism, whatever you want to call it, whether it's a disease or a condition, I don't even care, that label. There's this nasty little piece, and that is this. Drugs, whether your drug is booze or dope or weed, drugs feel good.
They do.
Whether you're self-medicating because you're depressed, right? Or whether you're just a little dilettante and you want to sniff some cocaine, drugs feel good, and it's dirty, and it's illegal, and it's nasty, and there's pleasure in there. And look where we live, in the puritanical states of America. And, check it out. That makes the addict himself a little extra self-hating, and certainly it makes it really easy to legislate against that. We legislate against prostitutes and all kinds of other pleasure, and we tax the hell out of them.
Right.
There's that, and no one really, I very rarely hear in a 12-step meeting or even in a...
Well, because you constantly hear people say, my best day sober was never worse than my worst day drinking, or something to that extent. Right. And I got to say...
If you're going to say a quote, you should get it right.
Okay, my worst day drinking isn't as good as my best day sober. You hear a lot. It's a constant thing, and I could say I honestly, to God, disagree with that.
Me too.
And I would say, if you're truly honest, that's not true.
Right, please.
I had some pretty damn good days when I lived in Israel for a couple of years. I had some pretty damn good days. That when I was first getting sober and I wanted to blow my brains out.
First getting Sabra?
Sabra, yes.
The thing is that obviously it's not sustainable.
Right. That's the problem. And the runs get shorter. I always say if everybody could relapse and go on a year run, nobody would be sober. The problem is that the runs become like, they started out in the beginning when you're first trying to get sober, they're like a year and a half, then they go to 6 months. At the end, it's like you relapse, you're like out for a day and a half before you...
And the part that I think's moral with regard to that and having runs that feel good and are okay, it's a lack of really understanding how your behavior affects other people. And
there's no understanding of that.
So the denial that your behavior actually has consequences to the people around you and causes pain and trouble for, while you're out there being hedonistic and having fun.
Well, it's like we were talking about, with diabetes and being there for your kids. Mm-hmm. When you're using, when you're in active anything, the last thing you're going to want to do is show up.
Of course.
The last thing you're going to want to do is be in a place where people are happy. I mean, I heard somebody say that one time. They go, "There's nothing better than being on the maternity ward when everything is good, but there's nothing worse than being in the maternity ward when everything is bad."
I gotta tell you, last night I went to go see Echo and the Bunnymen, and nobody's probably gonna know who Echo and the Bunnymen is.
None of us know.
I'm old enough.
You're old enough anyway. Okay, so I went to see Echo and the Bunnymen last night, and it's one of the first medium-sized concerts that I've been to in a little while.
Oh, I thought it was a movie.
Oh, jeez.
Judah, dance.
Wow. You don't know Echo and the Bunnymen?
No.
Ian McCulloch? Wow.
No.
Okay, anyway.
Wow.
So it's kind of sad.
That's why George
I feel
Bush
bad
got
for him,
reelected.
actually. Yeah, right? So anyway,
I only listen to country
but I was
music.
there, right?
Sure,
And
okay.
I was with my wife, and and she didn't really know who Echo and the Bunnymen was either. So maybe it's not as crazy as I'm thinking. But it was interesting. I was having fun, but it wasn't like it was in 1984. First of all, neither was Ian McCulloch, who's now 50, whatever. But there was like all these, can I say Jack, whatever, in the audiences. They were just so annoying. I mean, one guy was rolling on ecstasy, and he was like pretending he was fishing in the air.
We sure he was pretending?
No,
Like
he was
might have
just,
thought he was.
just out of his mind. And it's just like, I'm just like, it's like.
Well, that's just, I think you're getting it's like what we always talk about. There's certain things you grow out of. It's like you shouldn't be 30 wearing a jersey on a street.
This guy was like 32 or something. He looked
Right.
like
There's a certain point. It's like you never want to be. I never want to.
So anyway, I didn't
sorry.
finish. So he called me square because I told him to just take it a little easy, right, before I like maced him or something. You know what I mean?
He told him to take it a
And so
little easy.
he's like, you're square, right? He does a little square thing and points at me. And my wife whispers to me, and she goes, that whatever, I should coke in my neck for years, and I got to hear some guy calling me square at an Echo and the Bunnymen concert. It's like, dude, you're 35, get a life, It's like.
I gotta say that was really hard though, and it's something I've when I got sober, it was really hard. Who am I? And I think so many people when they first get sober deal with that.
Right.
Like, who are you? It's like, you want to say to people, do you know what I used to do? I used to urinate on the street in public and do crazy things. And
Well, you still do that,
I
Judah.
still do it, yes. Last week at the gas
Last week
station.
you did.
Yeah, last week I did.
Do you do it when you dance?
Does he dance it when he does it?
I make other people urinate.
Okay, got it.
And I multiply.
Actually, we got to roll it up.
Yes.
We got to take a break, and then we have our next guest coming in, Matt Knost, who's a great comedian. He's going to talk about his experience with getting sober. We're listening to KLEAN Radio. You can reach us at 877-8.
830. That's 8778-830.
And we will be back in a few minutes. All right, welcome back. This is Andrew with my host Judah. We got Doug Caine in here from A&E's Relapse.
Yes.
And his own company, Sober Champion.
Great name.
Thank you, sir.
You got to speak
gotta get closer to the mic.
Thank you, sir.
You're.
Okay, and then welcome Matt Knost.
I was about to say you're from San Francisco.
Right?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. You got the Knost right.
I got the Knost
You
right.
got the Knost right. Thank you.
I got it wrong the whole first hour.
It's all right.
But as long as we get it right when
32
you're here.
years it's been happening nonstop. You're not the first. You
That's
won't be
a
the
tough
last.
name.
Not really. It's the word to know. Get rid of the W, ST. It's the
Right.
same word. Silent K.
But it should be like
We're Germans,
Knost,
we're tricky.
right? Like
It probably at one point was. Maybe it had
Yeah.
umlaut over it. I have no idea. We got to go back. I have no
It
idea.
used to be Noose.
Yeah, it could
I know,
very well could
Noose.
have been.
Noose. We hang you. Noose.
It
got
does
a
sound
German
hard.
and a Jew next to each other. Hasn't the world changed?
We're bridging the
Not,
gap.
not really. I know what he's thinking. I could hear
Yeah,
it.
but it has nothing to do with you being Jewish.
That's right.
It has to do with that American League hat you're wearing.
Yes, the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. My birthday present.
We are in the Angel Stadium, broadcasting from Angel Stadium.
We are.
So.
What are you, a San Francisco Giant fan?
National League, real baseball.
Yes,
I don't know
exactly.
what you-
Here we
Real
go.
baseball.
It's just
Thank
real
you.
baseball.
It is.
It's
It's
National
real
League,
baseball.
real
It is. It's
baseball.
real
Yeah,
baseball.
It's real baseball.
Look, if your pitcher can ring my best batter's bell, then he needs to get in the box and face off. I mean,
Bam,
that's
there
just,
it is.
Yeah.
Simple.
that makes
That's the game. That makes it a game. You can't just be a punk.
Listen to the German guy.
You listen to the German guy.
German
Yeah,
guy.
what do Germans know about baseball?
Fascist baseball. You haven't heard
we
of
know
it?
about retaliation. We know about aggression.
Right,
So we know
right.
about- yeah, that's what we're good at. Yeah.
Staying up 72 hours, taking over a couple countries.
Taking a lot of taking a lot of methadone.
Yeah, right.
A lot of heroin.
Little crystal meth.
Yeah.
Actually, let's just go right into a call. We got a call. We got Steve from Chicago. Steve, you're on a Clean Radio.
I'm here, man.
How's it going?
Oh man, it's going good, man. Grateful to be clean, and I'm visiting. I'm in Chicago now, but I'm actually from Los Angeles.
Ah, cool.
My last name's Tilly.
Ah,
Like
Yeah.
the clothing company or whatever? Tilly's?
Like the actress.
Like the ice cream?
Yeah, kind of all three, man.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, a little bit of each one right there.
so what's going on, Steve?
Yeah,
You got a
man.
question, comment? What's going on?
Well, you know what? I'm just going through a few things right now. I'm back in my hometown, and just got done visiting. My girl lives here in Chicago, and from LA. I've been out here about 3 days. Came out for my buddy's baptism, and it's like just kind of living life on a day-to-day basis, and trying to get through it. Going through some feelings and trying not to let my feelings run my life. And kind of continuously trying to be grateful.
Right.
And just wanted to get online with some other recovering addicts and chat it up a little bit.
Well, that's cool. You've been sober for a while?
Yeah, just celebrated 10 years
Oh, wow.
on February 28th.
Congratulations.
Happy birthday.
Congrats.
Or happy anniversary if you're from the East
What
Coast.
was your drug of choice?
Heroin.
Heroin. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, it sounds like an old friend. I like you already.
It's like it's
10
like
years ago. Where were you 10 years ago, Doug?
People always ask me.
I was probably in rehab or jail or something.
Doug, do you get that a lot though? That people ask you like if you know somebody, they're like, "Oh, I knew this heroin addict."
Yeah.
it's like because I'm Jewish, I get that all the time. I know
Everybody's
this
in the
deli-
same room.
Yeah, I know this deli back east.
Yeah. They also always ask if I know any German comics. I'm like, one. I know this
One.
great guy. I can't pronounce
Just
his
one.
last name.
Right.
though.
It's all right.
Okay.
It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, cool, Steve. You got a question?
Well, I just was calling to chat it up a little bit, and kind of really, going through life
it's
on
hard.
life's terms, and just got done hanging out with my girlfriend, and it's like I really have the urge to act out. I just got done smoking a little hookah,
Right.
kind of ease the pain a little bit.
That would
It's
give
like-
anybody the urge to act out.
A hookah with
Yeah.
tobacco in it or with something else in it, Steve?
No, just with some tobacco in it.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like just dealing with some feelings. That's all. I'm with my buddy right now, and he's in the program also, and it's just trying to get into a mindset of being grateful. That's all.
Well, it's cool. I'm glad you're hanging out there and you got some support, and I really appreciate you listening. And keep listening in, and we'll keep talking.
But he actually talks about something very interesting because I noticed Doug's face during this, and I have the same reaction when people say they're going to smoke hookah. Mm-hmm. And it'd be like me just sitting in I used to love when I was drinking, taking the glass with the ice in it and swirling it around. It'd be sort of like me
That's
doing.
because you're like
No.
Mrs. Robinson.
Yeah, but most people do. There's something. Thank you, kind sir. I like Mrs. Robinson. But you know what I'm talking about. There's something to the whole. When you're using drugs or you're drinking, it's not just about the drink.
You saying the routine
Yeah,
of it
the
too?
whole routine of it.
Yeah.
And when I see people so people smoking hookah, there is a certain.
Well, it's a triggering.
it-
I mean, they've done a lot of studies. If you put a crack pipe out in front of a crack addict and you're measuring their brain waves, they pump through the ceiling.
Right,
They're
like-
fully activated, and they've actually released dopamine just on the presence of a crack pipe without even any crack in it. So.
Wow.
Yeah, just
That
what
worked
direct
for you.
anticipation of what possibly could come.
Yeah, it's anticipatory drug use. Yeah, like anticipating the drug use.
Well, that's one way to break it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. You just put the pipe back.
Hey.
Well, unfortunately, it
That
causes a
lasts
lot
2
of
seconds.
anxiety as well.
Of course,
so.
well.
Right, but it'd be like
Smoking
smoking.
best trade-off.
Right, but it'd be like
it's
smoking tobacco out of a crack pipe.
It'd be a lot cheaper, right? You just.
It would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what's the difference?
Although,
Why
really, did you ever smoke any weed out of a hookah?
I was not a big weed smoker.
And
It
when I
made me
say hookah, I
paranoid,
know
and
you're
it gave
from
me the
Brooklyn or
munchies.
something. I'm not saying
Out of a
hookah.
bong.
Okay, a bong.
You
I've
never
been
went
out
to
of a
Egypt
hookah.
when you were in Israel?
I
I
didn't
did.
do it.
I actually got to. Actually,
Okay.
was about to go to Egypt, then I got detained at the border for 5 hours because apparently there was a Jewish terrorist with a very similar name to mine, named
How
Judah
unusual.
Friedman, and they kept me at the Israeli border for 5 hours without letting me cross.
Wow.
So I never
They give
made
you a
it.
hookah?
They that would have been
Because they
nice.
thought you were
Yeah, they
5 hours.
Right. They did.
So, Matt, tell us a little bit about your story. You said your dad's a doctor, and
Yeah, my dad's a doctor.
Yeah.
My mom's a nurse.
oh wow, so you came from a medical family.
Yeah, I got another aunt that's a nurse as well. Yeah, it's kind of. I mean, I'm used to it. I'm used to being around it and all the discussion. But I use none of that to quit drinking myself. But you know, to each his own, I guess.
So was that your deal? You got really into alcohol?
Yeah, no, I was a drunk for years.
Really?
Yeah, every night of the week. I'm in a bar as a comic every night, and I used to
Right.
bartend on top of that. So,
Wow.
and then you trade with other bartenders coming in. So wherever you go, you can get free drinks, and you
Right.
just drink nonstop for you know. And I did for years on end. I mean, it's fun until it's not fun anymore, and it stays not fun for a very long time
Yeah.
until one day you just get fed up and quit.
Right.
I mean, but I mean that was the way that I did it.
Huh. So you just quit on your own. You just decided one day to stop?
Yeah. I woke up, it was a Monday, and I just said, you know what, I'm not going to drink today. And then I went to the gym for the first time also that night. And then I didn't, I made it through day 2, and I was like, all right, let's go 4 days. And then I went a week, and I was like, let's go 2 weeks, let's go a month. And once I got to a month, I was like, 6 months. And I got to 6 months, and I just went, I'm just done drinking, and maybe never going back.
Do you think you were alcohol dependent? Did you have DTs?
Yeah,
or-
well, when you guys were talking about earlier, it sparked something in mind. I think I always will be an addict, but there's 3 or 4 times in the past 4.5 years, or 4 years and 3 months, whatnot, where I've craved a drink, and it could elicit in my brain. I could taste the scotch in my mouth.
Right.
I could smell the smokiness. Like I had so much stress level. I was like, I need a drink, and in that moment, my brain created, and I remembered all of it, and I could taste it in my mouth, and I was like, wow.
And what'd you
It
do?
was powerful. I didn't do anything. I was driving home from a club because there's one guy in particular at a specific club I got to deal with all the time, and he literally would drive me to the point of breaking, and I just like, I got to get the heck out of here.
Right.
As I
You could
said
say
to
hell.
myself. Well, okay, hell. All right. I would have said something else. It kind of rhymes with heck. Yeah, exactly. So I had to stop there mentally for about a half second. But yeah, it's just interesting. Like I think I always will be on some level an addict to that. But I just quit one day, just knowing that if you continue doing anything like that, no matter what it is, sex addiction or smoking or anything to just an obsessive degree like that, it'll eventually just take you down.
You know, obviously you're very intelligent, just from speaking to you. I
appreciate it.
And
Andrew's hitting on you.
And I think
Again.
my wife's gonna again, right? My wife's gonna love this. Anyway, Amy, I brought home another comic.
She couldn't be bothered
Tingly,
though.
though. Tingly.
Tingly.
It's
Yeah,
tingly.
tingly.
But she
Yeah.
wouldn't be
I
that
think that
bothered
might
by
have
it.
been
You can't get bothered if somebody cheats on you with the same sex.
Well, let me make
Okay,
my
go.
point. Now
Yeah,
that you
yeah.
just ripped on me for 2 minutes.
Let's not posit this
Wait a
like I'm going to
second,
do it
Judah
here,
has
guys.
a point now.
Yeah.
Go
Yeah.
on, Judah.
All right. Okay. What's Judah's point?
You can't if
He's
you
gonna
brought
finally
home,
have a point.
If
What's
you,
Judah's point?
if you brought him home,
Right.
Amy couldn't be like, "Oh, you're cheating on me with another woman."
No.
She-
Well, still,
she-
it's a sexual
she-
act to be cheating.
Right, but it's not cheating in that case. It's just coming out.
Andrew, you're right. Judah did not have a point.
Yeah, right. Totally did
Yeah.
have a point.
It's-
Yeah, no
it's-
point. It's just another point of idiocy.
This is what I have to deal with.
Or look at it from the other way. Or did he have a point? It's all a matter of perspective,
Yes.
really.
Yes.
Or maybe
You can subjectively choose
maybe
his
it was
side.
more of a
Right.
share.
No, yes. My point was that if you cheat with the opposites, if you
a
cheat,
share of
if,
his practical
if
experience.
you cheat with the same sex, it's not cheating. It's coming out.
Okay, well that's
Yeah,
great.
that's rephrasing the
That's
action.
like that's
all it
that's
is.
like
We're in
and
Angels Stadium. You know,
and if you have an S,
American
if you have an S on your chest, you might be called Superman. I suppose that's true too. I don't know. You know. So anyway, my point was,
He's
Matt,
very
is
smart.
that clearly you're intelligent. You come
Handsome.
from a family where you're raised around medicine.
Yes.
And so, we've been talking a lot about whether or not alcoholism and drug addiction is an illness or a disease, or whether it's a moral failing, this sort of issue. And yet you seem to have been able to stop drinking purely by your own willpower.
Yeah, but it's also like I knew it wasn't healthy, and the physical shame, like I was drinking because I didn't like myself, and I knew the reasons I hated myself, and the drinking just made me forget for 6 to 12 hours at a time, depending on how long I drank and how long I slept, and then you wake up and go, oh yeah, here's this mountain of problems, let me grab another drink. I always waited until 7 p.m., that was my deal with myself, but from 7 p.m. to whenever I crashed, I'll drink as much as I wanted to. So, but I mean, I had to deal with those issues first. I don't know if it's a moral failing, I just think it's...
So you never got to drinking in the morning?
Oh, I've done it, but I didn't like passing out earlier or being hungover when the sun's still out. It's not fun. If you ever sobered up at 3 p.m., it sucks. Yeah. The sun's right there. You're like, oh, this is terrible.
You know what? For me, it is the birds. When you're
chirping.
If you hear chirping of the birds, like that's when you know when they're driving you nuts. You know you got a problem.
Yeah.
It's like 5:30 in the morning. You can't sleep. You're wired. Chirping of the birds, they'll drive you insane.
As a heroin addict, that just never bothered
me. That's not a heroin addict problem. That's a cocaine.
It's not an alcoholic problem.
It's cocaine and alcohol.
Alcohol. It doesn't really. Alcohol. I think the most depressing thing for me was being in Manhattan, the train in the morning. When you get done drinking and you're heading home and people are heading to work. and you're like, oh God, this isn't good.
And they're wearing suits. And
you're like, you're wearing hopefully some clothing.
And ships passing in the night. We're going to different destinations.
You're just like, and you wait. Yeah, that's the.
I did it to my dad. So my dad wakes up every morning 5 nights a week and works out before he goes to work. Right. Some days he runs 5 miles and works out, and other days just works out. And one day I came home at 4:30 in the morning, just wasted, and he's walking downstairs to do a treadmill. And we talked for 10 minutes, and he laughed, chuckled, and was just like, all right, we'll go to bed. You know what I mean? This is ridiculous. I'm getting up to work out. But it's one of those just ships passing in the night. I'm doing something different with my life right now.
Yeah, I had a similar story. My father would sleep. He had certain physical conditions, so he'd be forced to sleep downstairs. So I would sneak out in the middle of the night to go drink. So I'd throw my clothing outside the window, and I'd run downstairs like in my boxer shorts. My father thought I was, if he woke up, was going to smoke a cigarette. I'd run outside in my parents' house in Brooklyn, get dressed, go to the bar, come back, take my clothing off, run back upstairs. But something would sometimes happen in between.
But you still do this, so
yes,
without the drinking.
Something would happen in between where I'd pass out. So my father, there were a few times, would find me
passed out
naked or in my underwear as I was trying to get the clothing off.
It went from underwear to naked in a weird
and did it hurt when
you
pulled the spatula out? And how did it get there, Judy?
Was it a bad hurt or was it a good hurt?
You're right.
There's a different perspective.
It was a Jack LaLanne kind of hurt. Huh? Judy, you should not drink, brother.
That's for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
That is. I had a drug counselor when I was 18 years old in Israel. Really cool guy. His name is Johnny Pollack, and he goes, Friedman, I don't diagnose people. He goes, but you're an alcoholic. You shouldn't be drinking.
So that was a great plan. Throw the clothes out. You know, he walks out, I'm just going to have a cigarette.
Yeah, I'm just going to have a cigarette.
2 or 3 hours.
2 or 3 hours. He was sleeping.
It's not bad. How many times you get away with it before you screwed yourself?
Most of the time I got away with it.
Yeah.
And I mean, first of all, half the time your family is in denial, thank God.
Yep.
And then
to this day, my parents still offer me, like, every once in a glass of wine. Yeah. Just like that, you don't have a drinking problem. Be like, listen.
Well, there's the denial of the family, right?
Yeah, so, exactly. It's not as frequent.
The point I wanted to make, though, and the reason I mentioned, obviously you're intelligent, you come from a medical family, you stopped using on your own. And so my question was, a lot of people would say that it's really tough to do that, and that you're dry drunk, and that you're not really addressing any of the real issue of the disease of alcoholism. For you, was there underlying reasons that you had progressed into a state of alcoholic type drinking, or do you think it was just you were just an environmental situation that you?
No, I mean, well, you could say that initially, but I really enjoy drinking, and it wasn't just because, hey, I get to hang out with my buddies. Right. It's because I really like getting drunk. Right. The feeling that it elicits in my brain is probably my favorite.
So when you stopped, did you have any withdrawal symptoms?
Yeah. Get all kinds of things. I get some form like mild nausea. Nothing would ever happen. Right. But just like withdrawal pains, severe headaches for a while, just as my body was like basically equilibrium or just reaching some
Did you
sort of
see a doctor,
stasis.
or did you just
No,
stuck
I
it out?
just kind of, toughed it out.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
We do have a few phone calls, but we're going to have to take a quick break. You're listening to KLEAN Radio. That's KLEAN with a K. The number here is 877-830.
We actually have 2 calls, so we're going to take them pretty quickly when we get back. So hang on the phone.
Back in a couple minutes.
And we'll be back at KLEAN Radio.
It's KLEAN Radio on Angels Radio AM 830.
Presented by KLEAN Residential Treatment Center, a dynamic and professional sober living facility.
Here's Andrew and Judah.
There's that dance again for the montage.
To Afro Man.
Right? Welcome back to KLEAN Radio. We got our great guests, Doug Caine and Matt.
Come on. Can you do it?
Knost.
No,
man.
0 for 3. You're having a bad day at Angel Stadium today.
Knost.
To know how to pronounce the last name.
Knost.
To say Knost.
Knost.
Okay, we're going to go right to the callers.
Nice.
I'll make flashcards.
Flashcards, right? Knost.
Just rote memorization.
It's just this kind of retardation.
And
I
it's
have
what we were
with
discussing,
names.
why you have a hard time with other languages.
I can't speak any other language, and it really upsets me.
See, I took a bunch of Spanish classes in college. That taught me more about English than ever having spoken the language.
See, I've got to learn Spanish, and I'll explain. I've been in Mexico all week, learning about ibogaine and working with potentially some clinics in Mexico.
Oh, yeah?
But we'll talk about that in a second. Let's take a call first. We got Tom from Los Angeles. Tom, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Welcome to KLEAN Radio.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Good, how are you?
This is my first time ever listening to this show.
Oh, cool.
And I heard from a friend today about it, and I wanted to call in. I am a struggling addict. I'm still not. I haven't fully gotten clean, and I've been in hard times lately, and I feel as if you guys were talking about how people go through just like the rigmarole, if you will, of getting clean and sober, and then, they're just done with it. And that's how I was, and that's how I still kind of am. And so what I'm trying to seek right now is I'm trying to seek some advice on, putting my mind actually in the mix, not just not just emotions, because I know what I'm supposed to do, and I know where I'm supposed to take it. It's just very difficult for me to apply the steps with my real life.
I hear what you're saying, and I think a lot of people, you don't really know what it is to be to really be sober for a while until after you've been sober. It's something that comes with time, and it's not what we're used to. I think, people that are addicts are used to an immediate reward. I'm going to use and I'm going to get what I want, and I'm going to get the feeling I expect.
Right.
And sobriety isn't like that. It's about actually regaining control of your life and then actually being open to a lot of feelings. I don't know. What's your drug of choice?
Heroin.
So people that like heroin don't like to feel much. They don't like to experience, the outside world. They like what's going on in their head. Doug, you can probably speak to this more than...
I like heroin more than I like just about anything.
Right?
Yeah, Tom, if I can give you any advice, it's this. If you're doing steps or 12-step meetings or psychotherapy or medication management or whatever it is you're doing, if you can get just enough time off of dope, whether you use a replacement therapy or something else, you're obviously smart and crafty and wily enough to get dope, to figure out how to fix dope, to figure out how to cover because you're not in jail. So you've got some skills. You've got some innate abilities. And my toughest thing when I was trying to get clean all the way through the 90s was to figure out, what the hell am I supposed to do now? Because I was young, and B, I just wanted what I wanted when I wanted it, and that's never going to stop.
Yep.
Yeah, it's hard, man. It's hard.
And me being 24 years old, living in Los Angeles, I could walk down the street and get what I need. I could talk to somebody and get what I need. It's so easily accessible, and that's what I don't know. That's what scares me the most. I just recently moved to Tahoe, and I was living up there for a while, working at the ski resort. I didn't know anybody that had drugs up there, so it's not like I could just be like, "Hey, man, can I get some drugs?" Because I feel weird asking some stranger, like, "Hey, But down here, I can actually,
You know, find it. And that's something else that scares me about how easily accessible it is in my hometown. And if I want it, I'm going to get it.
But that's another thing about Tom, about Andrew was talking about getting some sober time together. Because when I first got sober, I'll be honest, I noticed every bar. You know, I could be driving down the street out of the corner of my eye, like from 10 miles away, I'd go, I see a bar. I don't notice anymore. 12 and a half years later, I could be at a party. You know, alcohol is probably the most accessible of any drug. And I just don't notice it. I don't notice it anymore.
The other thing, Tom, we had Bob Forrest on one of our past episodes, and I encourage you to go back to, if you go to KLEANradio.com, it's clean with a K, you can. I always have to say that. But Bob was really interesting. You know, Bob's a hardcore heroin addict, and he had like a really big music career. You know, he was it was like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Jane's Addiction, and Thelonious Monster. They were the three hot bands in L.A., and one of the top A&R guys picked his band over Jane's Addiction and Red Hot Chili Peppers. How much does that guy feel like a fool? But you know, Bob admits he ruined it for himself. You know, he liked heroin better than he liked being a rock star, and better than he liked music. And then it took him a while to realize that he had blown years and years of potential success. And then he got sober, and he realized there was just a few rules that worked for him. And I'll just share those quickly and recap them. One is don't use no matter what. You got to get that one down. Well, you know, no matter what's going on, don't use. Find a way not to use. And then he found that really what worked for him were two things. One was love. Find out what love is and what it's about, right? And the other one was work. And what are you doing? What are you doing with your life? And for Bob, it was art and music. So you got to find something that you're passionate about, something that you're as passionate about as you are now passionate about dope.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. And Tom, really quick, if you're short on funds, you can go to a community college. You can sit in a counselor's office, not a drug counselor, just a skills assessment and maybe a career placement. I'm telling you, your mind will get opened if you take a little test. And I don't know if they charge $5 for this. And the guy will tell you, well, have you ever thought about studying or being X or Y? You're not going to know unless you get out there and check it out.
Well, this might sound really weird to everybody in the station or whatever.
Probably not.
I'm the kind of addict that likes drugs more than I like attaining money. I would much rather go but I need money to attain those drugs.
It doesn't sound weird to us at all. You're speaking to the right people.
And there's a lot of people in jail that understand exactly what you're talking about.
So you're definitely, you are not unique, Tom. You're definitely not unique.
Yeah. So if you want to feel at home, go to jail. Stop taking drugs.
The thing is, Tom, is that while you're using drugs, and if you're going in and going out, right, you're never going to figure it out, because you're not going to get to the point where you can actually put the hours in to get that feeling from something else. It takes time to build up a skill, right, to build up something that's important to you. It's not that quick fix. And you know, like for me, like, you know, I'm sober. I, you know, have this radio show that I do. I own a treatment center. You know, this week I spent in Mexico City, talking to all these cool people about opening up new centers in Mexico and all these new treatments, and, you know, seeing their huge facilities at the World Trade Center. It's amazing. You have no idea what's available.
How big the world gets.
Right, and the kind of people you meet, the conversations you'll have. So much more fascinating than anything I ever did with drugs.
I think, but that, you know, I always say this, and because constantly you hear people, you know, scaring people with stories of people that die. Right. You know, you don't want to use because this is what's going to happen. I don't believe you scare addicts and alcoholics with death stories. You want to scare an alcoholic or an addict? Tell them how great life is going to be.
Yeah.
That's the most terrifying. Saying to Tom right now that he's going to live the greatest life if he stops is scarier, because then all of a sudden, sometimes for me, I'll speak for myself. It's
for once.
It's scary, Tom. It is scary. I got sober when I was 22, and it was terrifying. You know, when I drank, the world closed, and I was okay with it. I was okay with, you know, lowering expectations that people had on me, and because I hated expectations. And I was so terrified. I was always terrified. And this time when I stopped drinking, this guy Brian used to say to me, it's the not drinking part that's the moose. You have to not drink and then change. You can't change and then not drink. And most people die trying to change and then not drink. You have to, if you stop using drugs, I could guarantee you change will occur.
Yeah, you'll be surprised what becomes not important to you anymore.
Yeah, Tom, I'll thumb wrestle you to get Judah to sponsor one of us.
Wait, what? Say that one time. I'm
I
sorry.
will thumb wrestle you for the privilege of having Judah sponsor me.
You know what? I will take you up on that
It would be two hands joined with a thumb straight up in the air.
I'm going to take it as a compliment. It sounded nicer a second, and I will take it as a compliment.
Lovely.
Hey, look, Tom, I wish you the best.
And give him the number. Give him the number that he could call if he needs help.
Oh, 877.
Tom, you taking this down?
Let me get a pen.
Actually,
okay, go ahead.
You know, you can just go to cleancenter.com is our treatment center, and we have a phone number on there. And we have great alumni meetings that people from the outside can come into as well. If you're ever in the West Hollywood area, and there's just it's a great place. So I encourage you to come by.
Call us, ask for help, anything you need to talk about.
All right, thank you so much. All right, you guys have a good night.
You too.
Thanks, Tom.
Take it easy, Tom.
Let's just jump into our next call because they've been waiting a while. We got Shelly from Hollywood. Shelly, you there?
Yeah, I am.
Welcome to Clean Radio.
Hey, so this is awesome. I've never tuned in before, and I know Doug. Hi, Doug. Shelly from Astoria.
Shelly from Astoria. It's lovely to hear.
I feel like I'm back in New York.
Right?
Doris from Rego Park.
Not Astoria. Astoria, Oregon.
Oh, Astoria, Oregon.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a couple
She's saying the
things.
classier Astoria.
I thought it was Astoria,
The way you
Queens.
said
I'm
that,
sorry.
Clearly, a little elegance in this Astoria.
Please, Astoria, Queens. Get out of here. Shelly, how you doing, sister?
I'm good. Everything's good.
Right on.
There was a couple things, but I got sober without treatment. I got sober in the world, as I put it. And I'll say to I'm a drug counselor. I'll say to the clients, I didn't get sober because I wanted to stop drinking. I got sober because I wanted to change. And I knew after 17 years that my life, as tiny as it had become, was informed by the way I was drinking and using. So I connected those two things, and I began to, I guess, differentiate the truth from the false, like Southwood talks about in the cycle of addiction.
Right.
So, but that's the big thing. I didn't go to treatment, and I often wonder. I think it's, and I'm a drug counselor, and I'm just kind of talking about school, but I'm not sure if I would have gotten it the first time if I would have gone to treatment, because I was hard-headed, and I kind of made a design for living my own way. You know, I decided I was going to change my brain chemistry by changing my mind, and I also believe that I got bit by my dad. You know, he died of this disease when he was 48.
You know, Shelly, you're probably going to be surprised when you hear me say this because I own drug, treatment centers. But I don't think that drug treatment centers are necessary for everyone. And a lot of people are forced in at the wrong time. A lot of people come in coercively.
Right.
I did 6 times.
And they're not really ready for what they can learn there.
Yeah, because they've got a barrier up. They don't want to be there. So
they don't want to be there.
What
so
you're
what's the
saying
point?
is just noise.
Which makes it very difficult for drug counselors, as you probably
it's
know.
incredible.
Yeah.
The only thing, go ahead.
The one thing that I do think is great about some treatment centers, and I like to think that ours is different in that we do a lot of work with dual diagnosis. And for those out there that don't know what that means that we do a lot of work with underlying psychiatric illnesses as well as substance abuse issues.
You also don't force things on people, which is huge too.
Yeah, I mean,
Each client is specific.
We're very individualized,
Right.
and so we don't force people to go to AA,
Right.
although we encourage them to.
Right.
We also encourage them, if they don't want to go to AA, they've got to do something. So Buddhist Recovery, or there's a few other organizations we affiliate with as well. So, but once again, for us, it's about trying to find that point of interest for people. You know, what is it that's going to turn on the light bulb? And it's always, I think at the end of the day, like Bob Forrest said, and I quoted earlier, you got to decide that you're not going to use and
No
you're not
matter
going to drink
what.
no matter what.
Yeah.
And that's got to come from the person.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. And my job is to help them manifest within themselves the desire to sustain the emotional charge of life unmedicated.
Right.
And something I say often is you need to be willing, prepare to be willing to be profoundly uncomfortable
Yeah, that's a great point, what she just said, because I say that to people a lot. I say, I pray you have one of the worst days in the world sober. You know, I pray that when you're sober, there's a day that will come that you want to peel the skin off your body and you want to die. And if you could make it through that day, there's a good chance you'll stay sober forever.
That's exactly true.
And because most people, and Doug was sharing that he's been in 7 rehabs. I was in 6 rehabs. Every time I got to that day before I got sober this time, I drank because the pain got too great. And this was the first time that I didn't drink when I had that day, where I woke up the next day and I realized my feelings couldn't kill me. Because I believe there's so many alcoholics and drug addicts out there that truly believe their feelings can kill them.
It's intolerable. And it's also every day, every time that we do that we sustain that hit, our brain chemistry changes. And neurochemically, the synapses begin to respond differently. And I have to believe that that's what I guess they were talking about being recovered, in that sense. Because the anxiety and the bone-crushing sadness and bereavement that was in me has completely dissipated in the healing process.
I can't agree with you more. And there's another sadness that I see a lot, and unfortunately, I have clients that come in and they've done irreversible damage. And I think this is something that people don't talk about a lot, that people think that you always at some point have a get out of jail free card with addiction.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is a lot of people die from it. And a lot of people are impaired permanently.
Well, look at the guy that, sadly, if he overdosed, I don't know how he ended up in the hospital this past weekend. It's Jeff Conway.
Right.
You see a lot of, people that are just...
But, I see it a lot. I see a lot of people that, have seizure disorders now from using crystal meth, that never had seizure disorders before. Now they have to be on anticonvulsants. I see people that have chronic dyskinesia, which is a type of shaking. They can't stop shaking. I see people that get strokes and lose the ability to use an arm. See that a lot from crack cocaine. And this is like a big part of the illness that a lot of people don't see. They don't realize it happens, and yet it's very prevalent. And then there's the things that you hear about, but people don't really think about, like DWIs, where people get in an accident, they kill other people, or they kill themselves. So there's a lot of ramifications to, being an addict that don't necessarily go away and you can't get out of. It's not just a matter of you're always going to be able to get sober. So when somebody is resistant to treatment or has a chronic problem with relapse, since Doug's here and likes to talk about relapse a lot, right? I think it's still important that we try. And family members that are suffering, watching one of their family members kill themselves, and I think on some level, all drug abuse, when you're at the point of abuse, not and into addiction, heavy abuse and into addiction, there is a suicidal element to it. It is suicidal behavior on some level, whether subconscious or conscious. So I think it's important that, treatment professionals, if possible, are brought in. I don't know, Doug, you probably see this all the time, right? You're dealing with chronic relapsers that are like live to die addicts, right?
Yeah, hate the phrase chronic relapser. I call them constant relapsers.
Constant relapsers, okay.
Chronic's a little spooky for me. Anyway,
because you associate it with something else. Never mind.
No, I associated with that hooker you were talking
about.
What? There's a spook here, and the spook is there's this notion with a constant relapser. The story he starts to tell himself is, I cannot get it.
Right.
I'm one of those guys that they describe in the AA book, constitutionally incapable of
being
blah,
honest,
blah, blah, whatever, right? There's a vision. You can kind of adopt that vision after you mess up a few times, and then there's brain patterning. And when that brain patterning and your vision are complementing one another, it's very rare, unless you've got a residential treatment facility like what you described at KLEAN, and everybody claims to have individualized care.
Right.
Give me a break. Yeah. If it's really happening, if you can really assign the right providers to that suffering addict, and you can get that behavior modeled, see some health modeled, like in small pieces, great, outstanding. There's a chance there.
See, I'm a big believer, and Dr. Coe's been on our show a lot, and Dr. Coe and I have been in business together in the business of mental health since 92. We came out of acute care psych. He's a psychiatrist. We started psychiatric hospitals together. And all I ever worked in was acute care psychiatric hospitals for years. And I didn't really get into working with addicts outside of acute care psychiatric hospitals really until about 5 years ago. And I really always thought when I was working in acute care psych that addiction was sort of, secondary. It was always ancillary to underlying psychiatric care. And in an acute care psychiatric hospital, how it works is you go in, you get a diagnosis, and if you have substance abuse, you go to one group a week, and nobody really cares about it, honestly, because it's thought of as self-medicating, and it's not really addressed. And then I really realized that there is this need for true dual diagnosis treatment. So what's really cool about what we've put together is we've come from the position of being acute care psychiatric providers that now are treating substance abuse as the primary diagnosis, right? But we have a real deep understanding of psychiatric disorders and personality disorders. Very rare.
That's very rare what you have, and that's why residential treatment centers don't work for the constant relapse.
Well, 97% of treatment centers are on the Minnesota model, which is basically the 12-step model. And so I think that's important. I think that there's a lot of good recovery there. I think a lot of people have been saved by that. But, we have medicine.
Why is their failure rate 97%?
It's a high failure rate, yeah. I mean,
because I don't believe most people go into treatment, like we were discussing before. Most people don't go into treatment because they want to be there.
Or I don't think they get the attention that they need for the problems that are really going on.
But that's without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell, of all the current clients that I have, there's only, and I think there's only two that really I would call pure substance abuse clients.
So hold on, you're saying that the vast majority aren't psychoanalyzed on some level to determine what's going on beyond the addiction?
No,
you'd be shocked by.
You should see you should see the questionnaires that most rehabs ask you when you go to these rehabs. They used to ask me. They used to go, "How much do you drink a day?"
Right.
And you remember that question? And I used to look at them and go, "Well, if I knew, I probably wouldn't be here."
Right.
And I mean, that was my answer because
I was bothering to count.
And I remember saying to them,
the veal.
Yeah.
Somebody doing rim shots for that? That's a nice setup punch.
And I remember saying to them, I think something else is wrong. Like something else. Like I need. Is there anybody that I could see?
How is that possible? Like, how is that possible? They're not psychoanalyzing.
Because most treatment centers run on something called money. And a lot of treatment centers are more interested.
I can't say that. I think there's a lot of very, very well-meaning and very sincere people that work in a lot of treatment centers that are trying to help. But I think that the industry is somewhat unregulated.
Right.
It's pretty the gatekeeping to actually open a residential treatment center relative to say an acute care psychiatric hospital is different, and the level of medical expertise that's required is very different. Okay. So you have an industry that sort of self-perpetuates itself from the people that have recovered in recovery.
Right, which is why 97% of residential treatment facilities are on that Minnesota model.
Right, because you have people that got sober in AA, it worked for them.
And then become drug counselors.
And they become drug counselors, or they open a treatment center.
Right. See, but the problem with that is all advice is autobiographical. It's from only your experiences. I mean, you can ingest other people's, but ultimately just relaying your opinion. So why not pull in someone else who can give a secondary opinion? Like, for me,
well, it's actually like, I don't want a schizophrenic doctor treating my schizophrenic son. You know what I mean? Like, you would never think of that as a good idea. You know what I mean?
I get it.
It's like when you have a fat doctor.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, you have a fat doctor, and he's telling you you're unhealthy. You're like, thanks, doc.
My dad's an oncologist, and some of his partners smoke. Like, hypocrisy has no bounds. I mean, you know it's bad. People still do it. But like when I drank, I was anesthetizing my emotions, and that seems. I mean, at least from this person's perspective, it would seem as though others would go through that as well. That would be a common occurrence.
Definitely helps, and which is one of the great things about the 12 steps is one alcoholic helping another. But one of the things we've constantly discussed on the show is that that's not always enough.
Well, I think my goal with KLEAN has been really to get everybody on the same side of the table. For years now within the treatment industry, you've had these camps. You've had like the AA camp, you've had the medical model camp, you've had the more outlier like SOS and rational recovery and all these different camps. And my thing is that really the goal is that we want to help people, we want to get them sober, we want to get them healthy. And there's no reason that any of these groups should be opposing each other or not being open to allowing.
Because if you believe in your thing, then it doesn't. Then other people's views don't matter.
I'm going to use my wife because I'm allowed to. But my wife, for example, she saw the top psychiatrists in the world. She went to every kind of kooky kind of like shaman thing and she could find. She went to psychics. I mean, all sorts of crazy stuff. Went to all the top rehabs in LA, and she got sober in AA.
Yeah, me too.
Because she was ready.
Yeah, it's exactly my story. 6 rehabs, I got sober in AA.
And I know other people that have done it themselves, like Matt here, right? And I know other people who have just, nobody got it till they finally actually got the proper treatment in the residential treatment center where there was a psychiatrist and a good internist, an affiliation with that residential treatment center. And they joined with a counselor that could let them see what their problem was. And they got a good full diagnosis. So it's different for each client. It's different for everybody. It takes a combination of factors for a person to get sober.
It does. And really, the best treatment provider is a resource broker. Whether you're in a residential facility, or you've got a sober coach, or you've got a sponsor or a good friend in one of the 12-step fellowships, somebody who can broker resources, because then you can't broker resources for yourself because you don't have the resources.
My dad is actually a biophysicist, and I once asked one of his graduate students why my dad he's a pretty famous professor, well known, and he's a Guggenheim Fellow and a bunch of other things. And I asked one of his graduate students, why is it that my father's so popular as a professor? And they said because he's read everything about his field, and you can go to him, and within about an hour or so of having a conversation, he'll tell you what you need to do to organize your research and to move your career along. You don't have to go do all. So you're right. You need someone that's almost, I hate to say paternalistic, but you need like that paternalistic sort of El Jefe sort of figure.
It's like a manager. You need somebody in your camp.
You need an expert
rooting for you.
In the hip hop world, we call that a big baller.
Yeah, a big baller.
You need a corner man.
But you need an expert.
And it's what Bob Forrest also is talking about, which is love, which is you need somebody in your camp
who cares,
who's genuinely cares, who's going to love you back to health. Because I got to say, one of the biggest things addicts and alcoholics are missing is love. Right. And I don't mean to sound sappy, but it's the truth. You need somebody that's going to say it's going to be okay.
It's not just addicts and alcoholics.
It's everybody, right?
There's loneliness is pervasive.
Right. People just want to say, you want to hear people say it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I had that, thank God, this time. My sponsor, and I was lucky to find that person.
Right, lucky or blessed, who can say, right?
Yeah.
And well, Shelley, we got to take a break real quick. Sorry. But Shelley, thank you so much for calling in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I hope you keep listening.
I will.
And we'll be back in a couple minutes. It's KLEAN Radio.
Lifestyle Show presented by KLEAN Residential Treatment Center.
On Angels Radio, AM 830.
Welcome back to KLEAN Radio. Andrew is running a little late right now. He's in the bathroom.
So we can talk about him.
And we can talk about him. Andrew
Get your shots in now. Before he can defend himself. Oh,
here he is.
10 seconds. Last chance. Last chance. Sniper fire.
Darn it.
I know. You guys thought you had a chance to get over on me, huh?
Yeah.
He's good. He must be a psychiatrist or something.
No, I'm actually a clinical social worker. But
same thing.
Yeah, I work
no
for
prescription pad. That's
work for a long time. That's
no legal prescription.
Actually, I really don't think the degree matters as much. I got out of grad school and I did 2 years in graduate school and it was great. But for the first 5 years of my career, I worked in psychiatric hospitals and prisons like throughout the Gulf South, like just day in and day out. And
That must have been a wild
There's
ride.
nothing like the experience of.
Did you just say wild ride after he said prisons in the Deep South?
Yes, I did, but I mean, it might, yeah.
Freudian slip.
No,
Well,
it
I
must
really-
have been
for me,
quite the learning.
Well, for me, I was like, I really wanted to know what human nature was, and the first thing I came up with was human nature is everything that human beings do. Right? That's the definition of human nature. There isn't, this idea that there's aberrant behavior is just not true. It's all behavior. The second thing I found out was that it takes a long time to really understand the difference between, say, drug-induced psychosis, schizophrenia, and bipolar illness in a manic state when they first come in to the hospital. And, most clinicians haven't worked long enough in an intense environment to be able to understand those differential diagnoses in a real way. The other thing, it takes a while to kind of, have them sit there. But, it took me probably another, I'd say, 2 to 3, it took me 2 to 3 years of sitting there working with clients, though. Honestly, I hate to even admit this because in these 2 to 3 years I wasn't treating people as well as I should have. But before I could really sit there and see the differences, and there's huge debates even now.
That's an interesting thing you're bringing up because when you graduate med school, you do your rounds in a hospital. A doctor brings you around to patients.
Residency.
You have your residency, but with addiction. It's like imagine if you were in your therapist's office or the doctors bring you around rounds and they're like, what do you think his problem is? I see the needle tracks marks in his arm. He was sleeping outside last night.
But you know what? Drug-induced psychosis looks a lot like dementia, looks a lot like schizophrenia.
Well, they mask each other.
Yeah, and sometimes they're one and the same. Like most schizophrenics abuse amphetamines because it makes them feel normal. So, you've got there's this dual diagnosis category where, sometimes it's both, So
is the amphetamine that just replacing what the brain doesn't properly produce to equalize the brain
actually,
itself?
it doesn't, there's a lot of different, of course, explanations of why it happened, but what we do know is it does make people with thought disorders, and schizophrenia is a thought disorder, it makes them feel more organized, and it makes them feel what they're thinking is more right. And in fact, even people that don't have schizophrenia tend to report that sensation, especially with like crystal meth. Like they'll say, oh, I took this and all of a sudden everything made sense.
And their kitchens get clean.
Right, and their kitchens get very
clean. Top to bottom.
Unfortunately, it also makes them believe that what they think is really right is, unfortunately, generally isn't really right.
And they also pick their skin a lot.
Well, they start seeing connections. So they think everything's connected in ways that they're not really connected, and that's the psychotic part about it, where they actually think that the reason that the license plate had 3 3s in it was because that connects to the planets lining up a certain way, and
so
why
they're Oliver Stone fans.
Right? You're
right.
Everything connects.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah. So it can be difficult, but it's important, and most people that haven't seen a lot of real true psychiatric illness at a very high level of acuity, really bad psychiatric treatment or cases, tend to just dismiss all the symptoms as being induced from drugs. And sometimes it is. Sometimes I'm surprised. I've had clients come in and I'm convinced that they're schizophrenic, and you detox them and actually they flatten out. Now, that doesn't mean to say that their drug-induced psychosis might not also be aggravating a thought disorder that exists, that's organic, and that the substance is just pushing them further into that thought disorder and making it express itself more.
Okay.
Because everybody has like a point or a threshold. And you see this, my best example of this is you stick a bunch of 18-year-olds in the military, right? And some will get PTSD and some won't. Well, why is that? And, some will start exhibiting schizophrenia and dementia or psychosis early when they're exposed to a lot of stress. So your ability to handle stress is different for everybody, and this goes on a continuum. I'm sure the military's worked out the statistical continuum of, who can handle what.
So it's a saturation point.
Yeah, and that's how they separate special forces guys. They put them through absolute living hell.
Right.
And the ones that are in the top 1/10 of 1% that can handle it get to go kill bin Laden. So, right?
Stealth helicopters, lucky guys.
So we got 1 minute left here. So I just want to thank our guests again, Doug Caine,
Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Thank you for coming. You got a little plug for your show? Come on.
Thank you, sir. A wonderful show, too.
Yes.
And A&E is a wonderful network.
Well, good. There you go.
Thank you.
So check out Doug on Relapse. And Matt?
I'll be at the Comedy Store tomorrow and probably a couple other times this week at Lestat's down in San Diego next week. And find me on Facebook, Matt Knost.
That's great.
All right.
Very good.
And how do you pronounce his last name?
Knost. You just
You
said
got it.
How can I get it wrong?
I thought that's how we know you're listening.
Anyway, thank you, Judah, again for co-hosting my show, or our show.
It's a pleasure and it's an honor.
Right, and you can reach us at KLEANradio.com.
Yes,
With
and
a
you
K.
could with a K.
Right, and we'll be back
K.
next with a K, and we'll be back next Sunday night
With some great guests.
at 10 o'clock. And I will just be coming back from New Orleans, so I'll be a little tired.
And
but
again, let's thank everybody that helps put out the show: Jamie Broyles, Amy Dresner, Sean Patrick Kennedy, and God bless. Have a great week.
very cool.